Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And today, I just couldn't be more excited about our guest. Tim Kachuriak is the CEO and founder of, oh my gosh, what do we call it?
NextAfter.
NextAfter. Now, so I need to get a new job. Yeah, Tim, obviously I'm doing the wrong thing if I can't remember who my guests are. So Tim is our guest, CEO, founder of NextAfter. NextAfter is a marketing firm for nonprofits that helps companies or nonprofits raise more money. But the company's growing very rapidly, recognized as 422 on the Inc. 500 list. Tim, congratulations and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Devin. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Tim, I appreciate your patience with me. After 800 shows, you'd think I would have this down. Obviously, there are a few things I'm still figuring out. We are excited, though, to talk about what you're doing because you're doing such incredible work and you're having so much success both for your firm and for your clients. Let's talk about what you do. Give us a clear example, because I think the clear, specific example just tells the whole story.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we have discovered is that the web, the internet, is probably one of the greatest behavioral laboratories that ever exists, where we can literally test different ways of messaging people and then monitor how they respond to different offers in real time. And it helps us not just to improve results, but it helps us to gain a deeper understanding of who our donor is, what they care about, and more importantly, how we can inspire more of them to give to our causes. So we do lots of A/B testing, honestly. It comes down to lots of testing this web page versus that web page, and we're monitoring how people respond to those differences in tone, message, even sometimes colors of buttons in many cases.
Yeah, it's amazing how little things sometimes, not always, sometimes make a big difference. You've got a great research page on your website, and I spent an hour just yesterday Tuesday going through case studies, looking at all of those examples and trying to understand. I mean, it's fascinating. Some of the things you think won't matter do, some of the things you think will matter don't. What are some of the overall conclusions you're drawing from your lessons?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we are discovering is that how we communicate our value proposition to our donor is probably the biggest thing that can unlock not only getting and receiving a gift, but the amount to which a donor gives. Because for the simple fact, it's really interesting to think about, a nonprofit organization does not have a set price. Our price is often determined by our customer. Our donors decide how much they're going to give. So if we can communicate to them the impact their gift is going to have and help them to understand how they can be part of that impact, man, it really seems to unlock generosity.
That is really a fascinating principle and so important, so important. Can you give us a specific example of someone who articulates that mission purpose well and in a way that resonates with their donors, and maybe a contrast to what they were doing that didn't work as well?
Yeah, I can actually share with you one of the very first experiments I ever conducted. So I was working with the George Bush Presidential Library. So it was a $300 million campaign to build the presidential library in Dallas. And we were doing all the digital donor acquisition. So we're doing various things like social media and banner campaigns and search engines and email list rental, which is a very common practice. And we had a control email that was working very, very well. But we decided to test that, and we only made one tiny change. This is early into my optimization career, and so I was worried about breaking something that was actually working quite well. So I only made one tiny change to the email. It was the very last sentence, and that very last sentence happened to be the call to action. So it was where we're asking the donor to do something. And that one little tiny change, we did an A/B split test. We had 100,000 people in the first segment, 100,000 people in the other. That one change produced a 139% increase in the number of clicks and a 42% increase in revenue. And that tiny change was very simply, instead of communicating that, by giving a gift you get a tax deduction, we said by giving a gift you become a charter member of the George Bush Presidential Center. And so what we did is we changed the way that we messaged that the value that the donor is going to receive. Can I get a tax deductible gift? Well, I can get that pretty much from any organization. So that's not very exclusive, but by saying I can be a charter member, there's something implied in there that makes me understand that by giving my gifts, I'm part of something that's very, very special. So that's just one of many, many, many examples. But things like that, those little tiny nuances in how we communicate can have such tremendous impact.
It's fascinating to think about that because
the call to action, I may be able to get more people to click. Well, if I get more people to click, that's going to generate more traffic now to my landing page. Now, once I get more people to my landing page, I need to figure out how do I continue the mental conversation that began in social media and begin to move that through a series of thought sequences that's going to produce the conclusion, I need to give to this cause. And so that's where we focus on conversion. And as we talked about earlier, one of the cool things about being a nonprofit is that we have elasticity in our price, right? We have the ability to be able to influence not just if somebody gives, but how much do they give? And so that's how we see it. There's a really interesting kind of strategy that forms. My goal needs to be to get more of the right people to show up by increasing traffic, get more of those people to say yes by increasing conversion. But not just yes, we want them to say heck yes. We want them to not just give, but to give generously. And so that's why we focus on those three areas simultaneously.
I love the sophistication, but I know this intimidates some of the small nonprofits who really can't do this, but there are some resources on your site for them. What would you point them to as a starting place?
Well, I think that the number one thing would be our research library. So if you go to nextafter.com/research, you'll arrive there. And one of the decisions we've made early on is that we were going to open source all of our work. So if you go there, you'll find over 600 experiments of everything we've learned, the complete data sets, the screenshots from the experiments. And this is really what we have discovered is our personal cause. We may not be a nonprofit organization, but we are very much a cause-based organization. What we've discovered is that our cause is to empower and equip nonprofit organizations to do better fundraising so that we can inspire the most generous generation in the history of the world. So that's clearly what we're on a mission to do, is to do that. So research library would be the best place to go.
So Tim, you have become a role model in the industry as a leading social entrepreneur, as a brilliant thought leader. Who do you look up to as a role model?
Well, there's probably so many people. I mean, I am so blessed to have wonderful mentors in my life. And one person in particular is a former boss of mine named Tom McCabe. And Tom McCabe started a company about 40 years ago called KMA Direct Communications, and they did direct response marketing for nonprofits. And one of the things I love about Tom is he practiced generosity in every aspect of his life. I'm going to get emotional here just like talking about it, but one of the things that Tom taught me, and he taught me not by explaining the principles, but by allowing me to see how he lived out his life. And one thing he did in particular, which doesn't make sense from a business standpoint, but when you think about it in terms of like the larger perspective of the cause of philanthropy, it's amazing. He never made his employees sign non-compete agreements. His reasoning is that if somebody decides to leave and if they decide to take their clients with them, then that is his failure as a leader, and it's the failure of the company of presenting to the client that the value proposition is better for everyone to be together. But in doing so, and people did leave over the years, but they've all went to start other agencies. And he was able to, I mean, he says I give him too much credit, but I see that he almost birthed a movement that has way more impact than one company ever could have had. So that's why we made the decision to outsource, or I'm sorry, not outsource, but open source all of our work and make it available. We give away all of our best knowledge, wisdom, insights, because if we do so, it does two things. Number one, it helps the wider movement. But two, it forces us to come up with something better and newer and more innovative tomorrow. So it kind of keeps the healthy hunger in our bellies to go and continue to go after day, experiment after experiment.
Now that's really an inspiring example of someone you look up to and the reasons why. Now, you could be doing anything. The kind of marketing you're doing would be just as applicable for Fortune 500 companies as for large nonprofits. It would work just as well for enterprise clients of all sorts. Why have you decided to focus on nonprofits?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably the fundamental reason it comes from my faith. So, I mean, I grew up being taught that God so loved the world that he gave, right? And so what's interesting about that, you think about it, if you can allow other people to experience this amazing blessing of giving, well, it does a couple of things. It takes the pressure off them, their own self-centered desires to try and, spend every penny they have on their own pleasures or desires or, ambitions. But it also enables us to experience that, what people describe as that blessing or that glow or that warm feeling as a giver. And so I think by practicing giving, we experience, a kind of godliness, right? So sure. I think that that's the main thing that's always influenced me and continues to drive me is my faith.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that because that is such a powerful motivator for so many people. Now, we ask all of our guests for what we call an impact hack, a tip that would help us to do more good in the world. What's your impact hack?
Oh man, I said it earlier, but I'd say it's having very open hands. Hold on to things very, very loosely and give your best away. Give your best away. I mean, I continually am just discouraged when people try to hoard or hang on to the things that really could make a difference if they were put out there and given to people. So, being in the generosity business, we've decided that we had to weave that into the fabric of our culture. And so that's why we give away all of our best stuff. That's why we do, training and webinars every single month, trying to get some of our research out. It doesn't do any good if I hoard it in one spot. And as I mentioned earlier, that also puts, healthy pressure on us to come up with new things tomorrow. So I'd say just give it away.
Fantastic. That's a great tip. Well, Tim, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Before you go, please tell us how people can learn more about NextAfter and connect with you personally.
Great. Well, you can go to our website at nextafter.com, and you can learn more about our research. There's many studies you can download, or you can contact me on Twitter. I am at Digital Donor. You can find me on Twitter or send me just a personal email at tim@nextafter.com.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. We wish you every success in creating a more generous generation of people.
Thank you, Devin. And thank you for all that you're doing to help grow this movement. It's very exciting.
Well, thank you. Now, let's do some good.